early morning of June 22nd, 1918. Oscar Timm is the brakeman on a stalled circus train just outside Ivanhoe, Indiana. As he's laying down flares on the tracks, he notices another train speeding towards them. He desperately tries to signal the engineer to stop, but to no avail. Disaster seems.
Hello everybody, this is GI Railfan again and welcome to my page. Today I want to talk about the Hagenbeck-Wallace Circus accident of 1918. It is something that is pretty well known, but it's not really mainstream well known. There are even people that are alive right now in this area that have never heard of this accident. Even if you explain it to them, it happened so long ago that they probably wouldn't find any way to be able to connect to it. But I can connect with it because it's a human tragedy. In preparation for the 100th anniversary of the Hagenbeck-Wallace Circus train accident in Ivanhoe, I want to cover a topic that I haven't really seen discussed much. On the morning of the accident, brakeman of Extra 7826, which was the circus train, this brakeman's name was Oscar Timm. Timm was tasked with setting fuses behind the train, which had stopped to attempt to repair a burning hot box on a car that was labeled Hagenbeck-Wallace number 72. Oscar Timm got off of the caboose. He had his lantern with him. He had a couple of fuses with him and a couple of torpedoes with him, probably in a satchel. And while he was walking up the track doing his work, he noticed a smoke column from an oncoming engine coming from around a curve behind his train. He hesitated for a few moments, trying to formulate in his mind if that train had stopped or if the train had ran a signal. Once he saw the headlamp of this train, which was New York Central Extra 8485, an empty troop train going to Chicago to pick up troops to go to war. World War I was happening at the time. When he saw the headlamp of this engine approaching on the same track as his parked train, he knew immediately that danger was impending. Now, Oscar said that he noticed the headlamp as the troop train was coming out of a curve. The curve that he's referring to is this curve that begins just immediately east of 9th and Clark Road. Now, we're talking about the Porter branch here. And I got some things labeled over here. Let's see if I got the curve. Where's the curve? All right, here we go. Here's the curve. Okay. It begins just immediately east of 9th and Clark Road, specifically at William Street. All right. But you can also probably measure it from in the alley between Clark Road and William Street. Now, upon crossing Clark Road, the curve makes another shallow curl to the northwest before it straightens out again and goes tangent all the way to Ivanhoe. All right, and I'll show that to you all here, all the way to Ivanhoe. This is Ivanhoe Junction here, where the EJ&E crosses the Gary and Western and the Porter branch. Now, this curve, even though it was a very slight curve, there's nothing really dramatic about this curve at all. Like, it's a very gentle curve, but curves have danger. You create blind spots, certain spots on the line you can't see all the way up the line, obviously, because the curve puts the land in front of you. And some of these things played a role in the accident. Minor roles. You know, the curve wasn't the cause of the accident. Minor roles in the accident. But nonetheless, the curve was there and it affected the way that things were seen, especially from Oscar Timm's point of view. The circus train was stopped west of Clark Road at Ivanhoe Junction. So let's go back to Ivanhoe Junction here. The head engine was stopped about 70 feet short of the junction. And I have that labeled here. I'm going to put it on the map for you. In front of train. All right, so this would have been about 70 feet away from the junction. The middle of the train was on a crossover track from the Gary and Western that started from the Gary and Western and crossed over onto the Michigan Central Porter branch. Now, I wish I could erase all of these tracks here because back in 1918 did not look like this. In fact, I have a diagram. Let me bring up. Now, this is a diagram of Ivanhoe Junction, the way it looked during the time of the accident. As you can see, the Michigan Central Railroad here, which is the Porter branch today, was double tracked. And you can see there were two crossover tracks. There was a crossover track from track 2 over here onto track 1, and then there was a crossover track from track 1 over to the single track of the Gary and Western. All right, and this diagram also shows you 70 feet. The head of the train was 70 feet away from the interlocking. Okay, it also shows you where the end of the train was. All right, which is about 990 feet away from the tower. Now, if you're looking at a map of the area today, it's really kind of hard to visualize where things were. So I'm going to show you where Ivanhoe Tower sat. Boom. There you go. Let's zoom down a little bit so you can see. Ivanhoe Tower sat pretty generally somewhere in this area right here. I kind of butchered these switchover tracks, okay, because that's why I say I wish I could erase this, because it's really hard to represent two tracks just by using one. There was a crossover track from track 1 onto track 2, and then from track 2 to the Gary and Western. All right, so the original crossover would have sat like this at a steeper angle than the crossover that is there now. So these two would have represented track 1 and track 2, and they are measured as according to the measurements from the accident report. Excuse the noise, that is a freight train passing on the South Shore tracks. Kind of live right next to it. This is a crude representation of what it looks like. When I do my anniversary video, I will clean this up a little bit, but right now I'm not really focused on this. I just really wanted to set it up, show you where the front of the train was, and also where the end of the train was. This was the point that the accident happened. All right, so the point of impact was somewhere in between Stevenson Street and the alley between Stevenson Street and Hobart Street. That's how it's described in the literature. The accident report doesn't really tell you exactly where the point of impact was, but I've read books that that said, you know, and I had other railroaders on the forums tell me that the general accident site was somewhere in between Stevenson Street and the alley in between Stevenson Street and Hobart Street. So this is my best representation of where the accident site was. I had some kind of weird glitch happen where my computer crashed and my audio went out. I don't know what the hell happened with that, but it did keep what I previously recorded. So all right, so this blue line from the alley here at Clark Road all the way to the vicinity of Stevenson Street that I have marked on this map, that distance is 1.23 miles or 2,174 yards. If one were standing at Stevenson Street looking east, he or she would not be able to see all the way down of the main line because of the curve. I estimate the farthest point that could be seen from Stevenson Street would be Durbin Street. All right, so I'll show you this. So now the green line represents how far one will be able to see up the line from Stevenson Street. Okay, so let's take it out. So that is approximately how far one could see up the line from the point of impact to Durbin Street. Okay, from Stevenson Street to Durbin Street, that distance is about 0.82 miles or 4,344 feet. Anything east of Durbin Street will not be able to be seen. Okay, so all of this back here will be unable to be seen. I bring my blue line back. So from Durbin Street all the way back, you cannot see that looking up the line from Stevenson Street. That means that there is a blind spot in between Durbin Street and Clark Road that cannot be seen. Well, actually, everything east of Durbin Street is a blind spot. So let's go back and talk about Oscar Timm. He saw the headlamp, and once he did, he sprung into action. He did everything that he could to get the attention of the crew of the approaching train to stop. He yelled and he screamed. He frantically waved a lit fusee in one hand and a lantern in the other. He jumped to the fireman's side of the track waving and screaming, and when that didn't work, he jumped back over to the engineer's side of the track, bolting at breakneck speed. And when all of this failed, once the train got close enough to him, he threw his lantern at the engineer's side of the cab, and the lantern exploded either on the window or just under the window, exploding in a shower of sparks, fire, and glass. Now, from this point, we know that the troop train did not stop and ran into the back of the circus train, causing a human calamity that is still remembered to this day. I would save the rest of that story of that accident for another day, but now I'm just focusing on Oscar Timm, the man with two first names. I've seen conflicting accounts about the speed of the troop train when it hit the circus train. Some say 30 miles per hour, some say 35, others even higher. But how fast really was that troop train actually going? Where was Oscar Timm when he saw the troop train approaching? And how long did he have before the troop train passed him? In some literary accounts, it is said that Timm had made it at least 700 feet from the caboose when he saw the headlamp of the troop train. In the accident report, however, it states that by the time the troop train passed him, extra 8485, the troop train, he was 700 feet from the caboose. And the actual quote from the report reads, quote, "The train did not reduce speed as it passed him. He had gotten back approximately 700 feet from the rear of his train," end quote. According to the literary accounts from the books that were written about this, all right, Oscar Timm would have spotted the headlight 700 feet from the end of the caboose, or from the back of his train, which I have marked here. All right, so this would have been the spot where he would have first saw the headlamp coming around the curve. All right. Okay. From this spot, where I have it marked here, would be back a little bit further, like back towards Matthews Street. Okay. All right. But from the ICC report, it states that Oscar Timm had made it 700 feet from the back of his train by the time that the troop train passed him. At the same spot, the troop train would have passed Oscar Timm approximately in this location here, right across Colfax Street. Okay. That would mean Oscar Timm would have to spot the troop train earlier than what the literary accounts claim. This is just according to the ICC, okay? So that would mean Oscar Timm would have to have spotted the headlamp in this location instead of at this location. And that also would affect the timeline and the matter of events that occurred as far as he was concerned, okay? So that means from this portion, from this location when he spotted the headlamp of the train to where the troop train passed him, that distance would be 0.03 miles would be from the end of his caboose to this point. All right. But from this point to this point, that distance is 0.14 miles. So that means he took off running in this direction, and when he stopped running and threw his lantern, he was here, and that was at a distance of about 0.14 miles. It would have taken him approximately 57 seconds to run from this spot to this spot. Another thing that I want to point out is that, like, he didn't have forever to do what he did. Obviously, I just told you 57 seconds to run from this spot to this spot. But from what I mean is, from the time he spotted the headlight of the lamp to the time of the accident, that time was less than 2 minutes. So Oscar Timm would have had less than 2 minutes from exiting the caboose to witnessing that troop train run into the back of that same caboose and destroying the rest of the train that was parked on the Porter branch. Just less than 2 minutes. All right, and the time it took for Oscar Timm to run from this spot to this spot is based on an estimation. I also want to cover a little bit of why I chose this spot for where he spotted the lamp instead of at this spot. The reason why I done that is because of the time that it took from the train headlamp to be spotted coming around the curve to the point of impact, which would have been here. So we're talking roughly 3:55, 3:56 when he spots the headlamp coming around that curve, and he would have 2 minutes from that moment, or just under 2 minutes, I should say, from that moment to be able to run up the track and wave his lantern and, you know, jump from side to side on the track and try to get the attention of the engineer who he didn't know was asleep but assumed was asleep at the controls. So what I could do for you here is highlight this time of impact thing here. Matter of fact, I'm gonna take everything off. Okay. Now this time of impact here would be from when Oscar Timm on the literary part spotted the headlamp here, and that headlamp would have been visible here. Okay, so let's calculate how long it would take to get from this spot to the spot where he was standing, you know. Okay, so if we take the literary count, 700 feet from the end of the caboose, which would be here, okay, that means he would have to have ran 50 seconds up this way, or 0.14 miles back this way. So we can kind of measure that here. All right, almost hit it right on the nose there. Oops. All right, so Oscar Timm would have been here at this spot in between Dallas and King Street when he threw the lantern. Which, you know, I don't think that really makes a lot of sense. But let's just go ahead and do a fly and just to see where we are. Just to kind of give you the perspective. So this is, matter of fact, hold on, let's stop this. Let's not go yet. What is my speed? 30 miles per hour, apply. Okay. They say the train was going about 30 miles per hour. All right. So we're going to go 30 miles per hour on this tour and just try to calculate and see how long he had. Okay. So here we go. So the camera on Google Earth is flying along the landscape here at 30 miles per hour. All right. And you can see that, you know, this is taking quite a bit of time, you know. So here we are, we're crossing Burr Street here. Now that we've crossed Burr Street, the next street will be Colfax, all right? So that means by this point, Oscar Timm will already be running this direction, okay? So Oscar Timm will be coming up the tracks now, all right, towards the top here. And then this would be the location where he threw the lantern. All right. This little area right here. All right. It impacts the side of the locomotive. This is the literary point of view. And then the train just keeps on rolling, you know, at 30 miles per hour until it crosses Colfax Street here and then hits the end of the train, which would have been right here. All right. And to me, that just doesn't seem plausible. I mean, maybe that could be true, right? But I think that Oscar Timm spotted the train far earlier than what everybody thinks that he did, okay? So based on the ICC report, Oscar Timm spotted the headlight here, okay? And let's do a line of sight real quick. I already had all of this measured out, but that little computer glitch I told you about erased all my measurements, okay? So what we're going to do, we're just going to measure a straight line down this track. All right, so where he was standing at from all the way back here, all right, that would mean the headlamp will be just coming out of this curve here. And this would be what he would see. Okay. So the headlamp will be visible like right here around Hanley Street, in between Durbin Street and Hanley Street. So I'm gonna move my headlamp to that spot. And this would be right as the headlamp is coming from around the curve, right? So now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna draw a path here. It's not gonna be a perfect path, but I really just want a measurement. Oscar Timm spotted the lamp. All right, so we have a distance of 0.72 miles. How many yards is that? All right, so 1,270 yards. Okay, so I'm gonna save this measurement here. I'm gonna see. All right, we're gonna put that in temporary places. All right, so we got 1,270 yards. Now let's do some calculations here. All right, if the train was going 30 miles per hour and had to travel a distance of 1,270 yards, it would take the train approximately 1 minute and 26 seconds to be able to reach the point of impact. Well, where Tim spotted the headlamp, the point of impact will be here. So I guess we need to measure it from the point of impact. So we got that measurement already. So let's go down here, cancel, info. Point of impact, and that measurement will be how many yards? 1,331. Right on the nose. 1 minute and 30 seconds. So it would take that train 1 minute and 30 seconds to get from this spot where the headlamp will be visible from this location to the point of impact. So let's do a fly. All right, and here we go. 1 minute and 30 seconds minus 10 seconds. So let's go. We are now approaching Burr Street now. There will be no whistles coming from this troop train, okay? By now, Alonzo Sargent will be asleep at the controls. No one knows what his firemen will be doing. And also by now, Oscar Timm would have spotted the headlamp and will be running up the track right now, waving his fusee and his lantern, trying to get the attention of the engineer and the fireman. But like I said, no one knows what the fireman was really doing. I would say he was asleep as well, or half asleep. And Alonzo Sargent was knocked out completely. All right. Well, Oscar Timm is running wildly, waving, jumping across the tracks, trying to get the attention of the cab engineer. And we're almost to the point to where Oscar Timm will be throwing his lantern, which would be somewhere around here. All right, so 3, 2, 1. Oscar Timm throws the lantern. It explodes against the cab. The engineer, startled, he wakes him up with that. He notices that they're approaching the caboose, and the engineer never hits the brakes. And then, boom, runs into the back of the circus train. So Oscar Timm did not have long at all. He did not have time to walk from the end of the caboose to this part right here where the literature says that he spotted the headlamp 700 feet from the caboose. I think that is wrong. I think Oscar Timm spotted his headlamp far earlier. All right, which at a distance of just 186 feet. All right. But we're going to be talking about this again. This is G.I. Railfan. I'm out.